Alright, welcome back to another MCreator Tamed Entity episode. So today what we're going to be looking at is trying to get a Zeti to actually be ridable, and we're also going to have a mechanic for sitting in today's video. So this is going to be the second to last episode for that. The last one that we're going to be working on is the aggressive mechanics. So definitely tune in for that, but let's get started. So we're going to start with the settings because we'll need to basically set some stuff up here. So we're going to go to behavior, and what I'm going to do is I need to make sure that the step height is set to 1. This is going to help with you riding mechanics, so we can get over blocks. If it was what we had before was 0.6, then that wouldn't allow you to get over blocks and stuff like that, or at least a single block. So we need the step height to be at least 1. The other things that we're going to do is we're going to enable all 3 of these blocks. So basically ridable, forward movement control, and sturfing movement control. So basically side to side. So those are the only things that we really need to do on this page. Everything else is set up the way that we need it. The next thing that we need to do is we need to set up the AI pathfinding for the sitting. So basically there's a couple conditions in here that are going to need to not basically happen when we're going to be having the entity sit. So basically anything that is entity hurt, or entity that hurts attacked entity or attacked the owner, hurt entities that the owner attacked. So those 2, as well as wandering. We don't want them to wander when they're sitting, and we also don't want them to follow the owner. So all of these 4 things we're going to need to make a condition for. Thankfully, we have already pretty much the stuff that we need to do that with, so we can actually duplicate a couple of these. So right now what we're doing is we're returning as aggro, and we're also returning our standing condition. So basically we only want them to happen when it's one of those 2 things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. We're going to change the name a little bit. So we're going to go Zeti, and then something like AI task controller. Or control. We'll just go with control condition. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and add a AND statement to this, or pardon me, an OR statement. So we grab that, go with OR, because we want one or the other, but we don't want it to be our sitting mechanics, right? So we're just going to grab the aggro word here, and we're going to go ahead and set that up. So it can either attack when it's standing or aggro, and that's all we need really. So we can close out of the other one, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our AI conditions for the entity, and we're going to go ahead and set up our AI task control for both our start and our continue one. So we're going to do that for all of these. And the reason why we're not going to do just the aggro one for the attack procedures is if the entity hasn't gotten into that state yet, we don't want it to necessarily go ahead and have it cancel out if it's not in that state yet. So we want it to still target its entities without the state updating. So that's fine. Now we can go ahead and save that. And there is some stuff that we need to still do for the right-click procedure. So there's a little bit of stuff that we need to do in here. Right now what we have going on is if the entity is not tamed, we are basically taming that entity. Well, we're going to need to switch some of this up so we can get basically the sitting mechanics set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to branch this out, and we're going to use a separate condition for that. We're going to test if it is tamed, because there's less work, less code if we just drop the not block. And we can actually use an else statement to test if it is. So we can go ahead and add another if statement, add our procedure here. Then we're going to do that. And then what we can do is we can start building our condition up at the top here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and test if the source entity main hand item is a sword, because it just works out that everyone will probably have a sword on them. So it makes sense to have a sword for that. So we're going to go and scroll down until we get is provided item stack of item type, and then we're going to grab that. We're going to replace this with our main hand item, and we're going to select sword for this just so it's more available. And then if that's true, then what we want to do is we want to make the entity that is right clicking on the player basically dismount if they are mounted. This will probably happen because the mechanics for the riding mechanics, so we want to make sure that we're booted off of the entity. There is a block in here somewhere that will allow us to do that, so I think it's near the top somewhere. Let's scroll up here. So tame, cobweb, make entity, stop riding. So we want to do that inside of the condition for the right click. We're going to use our source entity for that particular procedure. And then what we want to do is change the state of the entity. So what we're going to do is we're going to first grab an if statement, and we're also going to need one with an else statement, so we can grab that one. And lastly, what we need to do is we need a task for a string, and we need a text block for this. We're going to set sitting. So basically we want to know if the entity is sitting right now. And we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and we're going to get the Zeti model. So might have gotten the wrong one on that one. So let's go ahead and try that again. Should be near the bottom if I can find the slider there. So all the way at the bottom here. And we want Zeti, and then we want our model. And basically if that's true, then what we want to do is make it standing. So we're going to go ahead and select these, and then we're going to go standing. And then after that, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and test if they are not sitting, which will count for the aggro model and the standing model. And we want to just basically make them sit. All right, so we're actually going to need to do a couple things with the Zeti itself. We're going to duplicate this Zeti, and we're going to call one tamed. And this one, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set our behavior to have our actual movement speed and stuff like that. So this one will basically be the one that we have all the mechanics and stuff set up for the AI. We actually don't need these for the untamed version. So basically follow owner and the entity ones here. Reason being is it's not going to be ridable, and it's not going to be, well, we can tame it, but we're going to run a custom taming mechanics. So we're going to go to behavior, disable the riding for the original one, and what we're going to do is we're going to also go to our AI procedures. We're going to delete the hurt by owner ones, so we just have the part here, and we're going to disable the mechanics for basically breeding and taming for this one as well. So we're going to leave it as regular AI. And we also don't need these enabled either. So we're just going to disable all of the conditions that we had before for it. And then what we want to do is for our tamed one, we're still running that right click script for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this up a little bit. I did try some stuff with making it sit and stuff, but that's not going to work that well. So we're going to switch it up a little bit. So this is the part that we actually need for taming it. rather than directly taming it, what we're going to do is we're going to despawn the entity and then spawn in a new one. So what we need to do first is we need to go ahead and despawn. And then, well, I guess we need the entity there before we despawn it. So let's go ahead and summon that other entity. So we're going to need world procedures, and then we're going to go ahead and select spawn entity. And we're going to go with our tamed one because that's the one that we're going to be taming. We're doing that at the current entity's location. So we'll be doing it right here. We can lower this. Now it will probably be in the same location for a tick when we still have that other entity there, so that's fine. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and check for that entity. So I'm going to move the particles up here for now. And we're going to check if that entity exists. So we're going to go with nearest entity. And we want, does entity exist? And then we're going to do a really low number like 2. Because it's going to be right on the position where it needs to be. So we're going to check for tamed entity. And we're going to use our entity position. So X, Y, and Z for this. And then we would need to get the entity location as well. So, whoop, that's an X. We do not want X for the bottom one. So like that. And then what we're going to need is to pass over the nearest entity. So we'll set this number to 2 as well. And we'll set tamed. We're going to create a local variable. So entity. Can't use entity, so tamed. And we're going to go with an entity variable, local one. And then what we can do is we can pass that over to our tamed one, so like that. And we also need the same exact position where it was before, so like this. Okay, so now that we have the entity here, what we can do is we can go ahead and despawn that other entity. So now that we have it stored at the same location and stuff, we can just despawn the original entity. So we just basically despawn it, and then what we can do is we're going to go ahead and run the tame mechanic that we had up here. So rather than tame the mechanics or tame the current entity, because that entity is already spawned, what we're going to do is we're going to tame our actual entity that we just basically passed over to the variable here, and that's going to be tamed by the player. So that's all good. All that is set up now. So the other thing that we need to do is this works for this one here. We also need a condition for our non-tamed Zeti. So basically the one down here. So this should be the, or pardon me, that's the tamed one, and then this will be the non-tamed one. So we don't need to worry about it being tamed now. We just need to basically go ahead and just drop this in because it's already going to be our tamed entity. So we know that it's going to be tamed when we actually spawn it in. The other thing that we need to do is we need to just make sure that everything is set up correctly. So basically when we right click on the entity, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the entity is going to require, like the player is going to require a sword. And we also want to despawn it because most likely they're going to be mounting the entity, which can cause problems when we're trying to write it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to dismount it and prevent the player from basically or writing it when we're actually running the script. And then we're just basically changing the state. So that will be what we need to do for now. So we can save that script, and our condition here, this one, that one's still fine. That's what we need for the tamed entity one. So if we go into here, we can leave all these conditions still set up for the tamed entity. just not the regular entity that we basically had. So the one that's wild, we don't want it to have the condition, but for the one that is tamed, we do. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, everything else here is perfectly the way that it is set up. We can tame it, and we probably don't need the mechanics for the breeding. So yeah, we need that for basically the entity part. But I don't know if we actually need to worry about that. If we can avoid having that particular one, we'll give that a try. So we'll test in game, and I'll let you know in game if that basically worked or not. If so, then we can just continue with it disabled. If not, then I'll probably be adding that back. So keep that in mind. All right, so there was a little bit of a critical issue that we need to resolve before we can do anything here. And a lot of this is going to need to be run on something a little bit different. So for example, we have this random clicking procedure here. So that needs to be moved over to a local variable as well. So what we're going to do is random, and we're going to set this as a number. And what we want for that is we're going to pass over this number variable to here. And once we're doing that, I want to make a quick test down here if that number is greater than the amount that we want. So for example, if it is 1 to 100 and we want only 10% like we had before, what we need is 90%. So the reason for that is the client side part, when we actually run the command, the number is always going to be 0. So we need this on server side still to only run once, but we also don't want it to run on server side just specifically because this messes up the visual of the entity spawning and despawning. So what we need to do is it will need to be random, and we need to check if it's 90. If it's basically running only on server side, that number won't change. So basically it's always going to be 0. If we open up the generated code and scroll to the top here, somewhere up here will be our variables. So we have our double here, which is our number variable up here for random, and that's going to be always set to 0. So when we run this on server side, that client side variable is always going to still remain 0. So we always need to make sure that the value is greater than our amount that we actually want. So for example, we could also run a test if we wanted to. So if it's not 0 or greater than 1, because we're testing for 1 here. If it's greater than 1, and if it is less than or %, we can also do that. So if it's greater than 1 and it's equal to or less than 10, that is a range that we would basically set. So it would always basically run. Now we should probably pass this over to our condition here. So it will always run when that's true. So that should fix the issue that I was having in game that would basically cause the entity to be invisible, still writable in there, and also caused an error here, as you can see. So we needed to basically fix that part up. All right, some critical fixes that I needed to do. So first thing was I removed the model layers from the actual untamed Zeti, and we basically went ahead and changed just the model to have the default texture and the default model for the Zeti one. And after that, what we've done is we've gone ahead and removed I believe the sync data, so this entity doesn't actually have any sync data now. And we also double checked to make sure our controls for the entity was disabled for any of the procedures. So anything linked to the triggers that we were using for the other one, we've basically disabled, so the update tick and stuff like that. We also updated all of the conditions for the tamed Zeti now. So basically what we're doing is we're using the tamed Zeti rather than the regular Zeti for these conditions. So that's why it was turning invisible. And what we need to do is, the only other thing that we really needed to make sure that we're linking all to the model conditions for the tamed one, not the other entity. So again, this was the other one that we had here. All of them point to the tamed one, not the regular one. The other thing that I ended up doing was I went ahead and changed the AI procedure, and I did add back sugar just to make sure that it was able to work as it was intended, and we still have all of these basically disabled when the entity is sitting. So that's the only changes that we really did. So let's go into game and quickly test this out finally, now that I know it works. Alright, so one of the things I forgot to mention while we were testing, or just about to go into game, that you also need to make sure that the tamed Zeti does not spawn. If you're duplicating the element, it will be spawning, so make sure that's disabled when you go ahead and set that up. So we're going to need bones for this, and we're also going to need a cheap sword just to kind of test with. So let's go down here. First, we want to make sure that it will not sit, so we can right click on it just to make sure that it's not going to sit with a sword or anything like that. So that's really good. Okay, so we can go into survival mode and we'll start feeding this one some of that. We got immediately changed. So you probably didn't really see it right off the bat, but the rotation changed a little bit. And now it will basically follow us. So if we go over here, it will start following us and stuff like that. We can make it sit by right clicking on it with a sword. We kind of pop off when it does do that. And if we go over here, it will not follow us. So we can go way over here and it will stay where it is. So the other thing that we can do is if we go ahead and right click on it with a sword again, it will pop up and it will follow us as normal. So we'll go over here and you can see it's following us now. And we can also ride it as well. So we can go up and down over hills, thanks to the step side being set to 1. If we wanted it to go over 2 blocks, then we would set the number to 2, and that would very well just change the height of what it can actually go up. We don't actually have jumping mechanics on this. I don't think there really is any base mechanics for giving it the ability to jump, so you would have to do something with keybinds and stuff like that. We'll probably not be doing that with this series. But we will be working on aggro mechanics next, which will require some model changes and stuff like that. But right now, that's pretty much good for now. It should actually still technically attack, I think. But it doesn't look like it is deciding to go aggro at it. So, I don't know. We'll work on the mechanics and stuff on next episode. But if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe, comment down below, rate the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace out.